Welcome to early May here in New Jersey in zone 7A on my small flower farm. Today I thought we would do a little tour to show you what's growing and talk about what we're doing differently this year, because it is May 1st and around this time I would actually have flowers that are about to bud. And this year there are very few flowers. We are past tulip season, got some shade cloth on this tunnel over here. We've got a few buds, but what I'm doing differently this year is I am not looking to hit flowers in May. In fact, I am taking Mother's Day off. So I do have a nice family related update at the end of this video, but this Mother's Day I'm taking off. I'm gonna enjoy it. I'm gonna enjoy it with my family in a way that is completely stress-free. But I want to talk about how the flower farm is pivoting this year and what that looks like. So we're going to go into the types of flowers that I rely on, the types of annuals that I'm still planting, and how everything looks. This is what the flower farm looks like right now, giving you a wide shot of me standing in the corner. It's around like 6:30 p.m. after a Thursday, and it's gorgeous outside. And the green that you see here, a lot of it is perennials or things that overwintered from last fall. Let's start first with perennials. If you've been following me, you know that I have had quite a bit of perennials that typically start blooming late May and really carry me through the month of June. Now, here's the thing. I would love to have flowers earlier. In fact, earlier spring is typically higher demand. But as you can see, I do not have a structure in the form of a greenhouse or a high tunnel. So instead, I'm trying to work with nature. And one of the things that I've realized is that without a structure, it is just really hard to achieve flowers this early on. And you're kind of working against Mother Nature. So in the past, I have had things like Sweet William and Foxglove this time of year. The problem with those kind of flowers is that Foxglove tends to be really, really tall, and Sweet William tends to be really, or not really short, but shorter. And I've just had a hard time making bouquets without something like ranunculus or anemones. And I do think that I could achieve anemones without cover out here. Just need to be a little bit better about planting them out in the fall. But you get my point. So that's why I ripped out my Foxgloves. I ripped out my Sweet William. The other thing about the Sweet William was it came in a mix. So there's some colors that I didn't really love, and the ones I didn't love were really short stems. So I'm going to be replanting Sweet William in the fall to overwinter to hopefully get for Mother's Day next year. But this year I don't have any of that. So since I don't have things like Foxglove or Sweet William, what's coming up? So I'm gonna take you through a few flowers that are going to be ready, believe it or not, in about 4 weeks. This here is my yarrow patch. So one of my favorite perennials. These usually start blooming for me around the last week of May and go all the way through till about, we'll call it late June. Now this patch over here is in its second year. I had divided from that patch over there to get to this section over here. So I'm pretty confident these will stay true to color. I am very curious how year 3 yarrow is going to perform in terms of color. Some people have said they turn more pale, closer to white. So we shall see what happens. And I have more yarrow all the way down there, which is a row I'm not going to show you because it has a lot of weeds and I still need a lot of work to do in that row. A couple of days, maybe a full week after that yarrow comes in, the sweet holly over here is going to come in. Now this sweet holly is also in its 3rd year. There are monstrous sea holly that we have. They have also liberally reseeded, which I have been pretty diligent about trying to clean up. I need to do another pass this weekend. But one of the things is that as I shift from selling predominantly wholesale now to retail, I do not need this much sea holly. Now, this sea holly behind me can literally generate like hundreds of stems. And part of the problem with the sea holly is that it actually grows really tall. It's really great for event work, statement work. It's not necessarily great for bouquets because it's just so tall. And if you try to cut the branching stems, it's not long enough. So this year what I'm going to do is I am going to pinch about half of them and see what happens, and we're going to reassess from there to see if I need to dig up any and if this is too many. But who knows, I might try some. There's a lot of flexibility with sea holly because it also has a really long window of harvest. So if you're interested in both sea holly and yarrow, I have several videos up here and here talking about them, especially how they perform in second year. But there's a lot of information around productivity, how much I sell them for, you know, all that good stuff. So you can check out those videos. Coming alongside those two crops are going to be my main focal, which are lilies. Now these you can see are crate planted lilies that have come back in year 2. And if the rain didn't wash these off, I could well, see, it already snapped off. These are not the greatest in terms of being out in the sun, but you can actually kind of read what this says, and it says Arabitex. So that's a variety that I grew last year. It's this like pink one. I actually don't know if this one's going to fully flower because these look really thin, but I can tell you that something like this will definitely flower. You can tell sometimes by like the thickness of the stem, whether or not it's going to grow buds. But I've got a lot of lilies because I've got lilies here, I've got lilies there, and I've got lilies over here. And these are lilies that are going to be in their 3rd year. And what I do is a process called lasagna planting. So this is a pretty tall raised bed. It's about 17 inches. The first layer, I put some soil on the bottom and I put lily bulbs, and then I put another layer of soil and I put tulips on top. And so tulips are now done. The tulips were all harvested about like 2 weeks ago. You can see there's still some tulips peeking through in here that I didn't get a chance to harvest. They blew open, but for the most part, these just like came in right after. And this is a really fast turnaround in terms of utilizing a really small space and getting a lot out of it. So once this is done, I'm going to cut it down and we're going to let it photosynthesize, and I could put another layer on top and grow something for the fall. I've got shade cloth in this area, but this is my little row of anemones and ranunculus. And I would say that in the past, my ranunculus have never made it this far because they've always gotten chewed down by rabbits. But I've planted more anemones this year than in years prior, just because I feel like that's an easier crop for me to maintain. They don't need as much covering and uncovering. So the first few stems are always going to be a little bit shorter. So the shade cloth has been on since the last last week. And we've been hitting like the 70s. Next week, it's actually going to get a little bit more cool and it's going to be raining. So I'll be able to take this off. But you can see these are looking pretty good. Like I'm pretty happy with the stem length of this one. It's the first stem of this flower. This is the fuchsia. So I did sell corms like this. If you grew this from me, let me know. But it's a very pretty pink. And there's some garlic that's also interplanted here. The garlic won't be harvested until early July though. But you can see there's quite a few anemones, some ranunculus down here, and hoping to get some stems in a few weeks from here. That is definitely the latest succession of anemones and ranunculus here where I am. If you have a structure, you would be getting these sometime in like late March throughout the month of April. That's like the prime time for them. But no structure, no anemones and ranunculus. You can also do caterpillar, low tunnels. I just don't have the energy to do that. But let me show you some other stuff that's also going to be coming probably around the June timeframe. This over here is Delphinium. I have grown some Delphinium before, not a lot. So this is my first year growing a decent amount. We've got 2 trays. Some of the seedlings got eaten up, but most of them did rebound, which is really promising. And this is like a lavender type of color. And then we've got another color over there, which is more like a baby blue. I have been intercropping in between. So these are radishes that are sprouting over here. And radishes have a really quick turnaround time. They're about 60 days to maturity. The great thing about radishes is that if you have compact clay soil like me over here, they help break up the soil, and so it's like a natural way of tilling. So we've got a lot of weed seeds over here. I've been trying to clean it up, but the soil over here is pretty dry and compact, and so I've been layering some of our homemade compost from a new compost machine that we've had, TBD on on whether or not I like it or not. That's why I haven't been telling people its name. But we need to amend the soil. We need to get some more compost trucked in and apply it to the beds. But for the time being, I would say that most of these Delphinium are doing pretty well. They look like they were on the verge of death this winter. I couldn't even see them, but here they are, and they are putting on good growth pretty quickly. Some other ancillary flowers that I hope to have in those June bouquets are stock. So grew stock pretty successfully in fall of last year. I started these from seed. I have a few different varieties that I'm trialing, and I am really glad that the stock somehow so far have made it unscathed, because I have onions in here too, and those have not made it unscathed. In fact, you can see that there is an onion right here that got eaten. And so I have a friend who thinks that the birds are nipping on the onions, but luckily a lot of the onions have recovered. They should look a lot better than this by now, but they've all kind of gotten mowed down. So I'm glad that they have any leaf growth at all. And I'm not going to be harvesting these onions until probably about 2 months from now anyway. But I'm hoping that these stock will put on good growth this year. This is the best that my stock has looked in early May. In the past, they've probably been more around this stage. They've been stunted by the cold because I got them as plugs. This year, I grew them from seed, and the things that I'm experimenting are, if you put 2 into a soil block, like a mini soil block, how do they grow? They come in plugs in 2, sometimes 3s, and they grow fine. That's why I was confident that it should work. And so far, they look pretty good. And because stock tends to run about 55% double, you probably want to double seed to make sure that you are getting a sufficient amount of doubles. So excited to see how this does over here. We've got a bunch of interplanting. Not only are there onions, there's some cilantro that's growing in here. This cilantro is probably going to bolt. I have some cilantro in other places that we're already harvesting from, but I would say that even if this bolts, I can still get some flowers out of them, because cilantro puts up these like white delicate flowers that do also look pretty good in a bouquet. And we've got some kale, we've got some mustard greens, there's a red mustard over there. So we have already been harvesting from the garden with broccoli rabe, some other greens. We've got lettuces going, we've got some broccoli sprouts. So all good stuff from a culinary perspective. I also have some Rudbeckia that have overwintered. These were actually, I think, from Farmer Bailey's. He had hosted a meet and greet back in July. I went and he was giving out some free plants. So here's some Rudbeckia. I haven't had great luck with Rudbeckia. 2 years ago, I grew a ton of it and it got overtaken by thrips. So we'll see how these do, but these do perennialize where I am. They will get very bushy. They will send up multiple stems, but they are great when they are pest-free. Have some Baptisia over here. I bought 3 varieties, 30 each, and about a dozen have survived from the deer. The deer have literally eaten like every type of perennial I've tried to put in. So last minute, I ended up rescuing a few from the landscape. And here's 3 over here. I have a feeling that these are going to get really big. I'm going to have to eventually move them. But at least for now, they're okay. I have some Swiss chard in here. As you can see, there's a lot of interplanting between flowers and vegetables. Sometimes no rhyme or reason. Sometimes there is rhyme and reason. But there is no rhyme and reason for why I put Swiss chard over here. I talked earlier about a home compost machine that we've had. This is what the stuff looks like when it's a little bit more fresh. It's this like brown look, and you can see that there's still orange peels over here. So my in-laws, or my mother-in-law, eats a lot of like fresh fruit and vegetables. So we're generating a lot of compost. What I'm finding is that this compost definitely needs some more time to break down, which makes sense. But it's like, I'm trying to figure out, do I spread it on top of areas that have erosion and are dry, or do I potentially put it in a pile and let it sit a little bit longer? So I'm still trying to experiment. But you can see over here, I've got more garlic. And if I was selling wholesale, garlic scapes make for some good design, especially if you let them go a longer time and they start curling. There's actually a premium that people will pay on garlic scapes. I have one more perennial to show you that's new. This is called Polemonium, I think, also known as Stairway to Heaven, and I bought these as filler. So I'm glad to see that these have flowered at this time, because now I know that I can pair these with something like Sweet William next year, and potentially some anemones and ranunculus, and these would make for really pretty bouquets. You know, the variegated foliage is something that I also really like, and so I had bought 30 of these, and let's see, about 2, 4, 6. There's an extra one outside. 8 have survived the deer, but these will grow and spread, and so I have a feeling that I'll be able to make my money back from the plugs that I invested in and basically fed to the deer. So we just went through the slew of crops that are going to be coming in over the next, we'll call it 4 to 6 weeks. After that, we have our next crop, which is Lisianthus. Now, I typically take a break after July 4th to whenever the first group of Lisianthus come in, which typically is that last week of July. So if you missed my video, last week I did one on Lisianthus up here, and I talked about how I use something called lactic acid bacteria to try to make sure that I could keep my Lisianthus healthy and free of rotting from a root fungal disease that is pretty common. And a lot of people will use something called Root Shield, which is a fungicide, but Root Shield is very, very expensive. So a homemade remedy that's a lot cheaper is something called Lab. So give that video a view if you're interested. Let me show you what the Lisianthus look like. Not too much change from last week. They're all still just settling in. I have another full row over here. And so this is 4 trays of Lisianthus. You can see that there's some other stuff in here, and these are perennials that are double Echinacea. And I'm very excited for these because these are supposed to be luscious. I really did invest in perennials last year, trying to fill certain gaps. And one gap was after spring, could I get certain types of like perhaps focals or accents? So I'm hoping that the Echinacea will be a good one for the summer. Now, also interspersed in here are mums. And so now we're getting further down the season because mums don't flower until late summer, if not early fall. If you can get your mums in like now, this time of year, they're going to have a lot of time to put on leafy growth. But these are triggered by short days for flowering. So if you get your mums in too late, they're not going to put on enough leafy growth for you to get a good harvest. So you can see over here that these have overwintered pretty well from last fall. A deer broke in last fall, which is why I didn't get anything, but they were also put in pretty late. So still debating on whether or not I'm going to take cuttings. I just don't know if I want that many mums, but I have probably a few dozen mums in here already. So that's pretty exciting. And since we're in this row, we've got a bunch of different intercropping. This is edible chrysanthemums. So I don't even know if they're related. I just know you can eat them. And my mom was really excited to see I had seed for that. This is some more of that red mustard, which is a Japanese type of green. These are all like unique greens that you can't really find at the grocery store, which is why I prioritized it. I had dumped some microgreen seeds just all over. These tended to clump. This is Swiss chard, so I'm going to thin them out eventually. But you can see there's like a bunch of random stuff. I've actually got some bells of Ireland that reseeded, and I had bought a tray of bells of Ireland. None of them made it through the winter. There was just too much erosion, and I didn't put leaf mulch on top of that area. But we've got a few bells of Ireland that reseeded, so I think it's only about like a dozen or so. But still better than none because I'll be able to get multiple stems off of a single bells of Ireland. There's some other small seedlings like Status over here that these are not going to be ready until at least like later July. I'm hoping to be able to have these with the earlier Lisianthus. These might even come in before then, we'll see. But the good news about Status is that if for some reason they're coming in at a time when I don't have anything else, at least I'll be able to dry them, or, you know, it's such a low cost, low maintenance plant that honestly, if I don't use the stems, totally fine. And next door over here, we have some self-seeded sunflowers that I put into the ground in early April. This is the first time that I put sunflowers into the ground, and basically all of them have germinated, meaning the birds didn't get to them. So I don't know what changed, but getting some sunflowers, and I'm hoping that these will come within like the next 60 days because these are the white light and they get completely demolished by the Japanese beetle, which come in during July. So it's imperative that if I grow white ones, I'm growing them like at the earlier part of the season. And so seeding them earlier and allowing them to germinate when the conditions are right is imperative. Like if I direct seeded them now and had them grow and I'll get them like a week or two late, that could be the difference between having white light and having them munched on. And you can see that there's also some little seedlings of amaranth in here, which I grew in year 1. And it's like, once you have amaranth, you will have it forever. There's more over here. So I'll just let it grow out because you just never know like what you need in a bouquet. And if there's space, I find that it's totally fine to let it go. None of this stuff over here is too close together. And even if it is too close together, sometimes you get thinner stems, which ends up working really well in a bouquet. There is a lot that still needs to get planted, especially in vegetable land. So I didn't show you some of the other vegetables we have. We've got some like peas growing over there, which are a little bit more cooler crop. We've got some lettuces over there, but we're in the middle of getting in things like peppers, tomatoes, eggplants. One of the goals I have every year is to grow enough tomatoes to can, and I always feel like I have so many tomatoes, but we're eating them throughout the season. Last year, I really reduced my tomato down and I got like 5 cans. So I'm trying to grow even more tomatoes this year. And every single year, I'm trying to improve my yield on eggplants too. So that's why there are a couple rows that are empty right now. We're going to try to get in some starts in ASAP. But one of the things that I'm trying to figure out right now is how do I structure my retail offering? And in the past, I've done things like a CSA, I've done at-home pickup, and even though I love this concept of a CSA where you have pre-sold bouquets, I don't love the administrative work of it. So I'm kind of leaning against doing a CSA, and I put that decision off till now because I didn't know where we would be in my daughter's treatment. So this is probably a good time to give everyone a happy update. So E had her final dose of chemotherapy this past Tuesday, along with her final scan. So 2 weeks ago, she got a chest CT scan because they want to monitor for potential metastases, and rhabdomyosarcoma tends to spread to the lungs. But she also got a PET as well as an MRI of her right leg, which is where the original tumor was before surgery. And luckily, the scans came back clean. So that means that she is technically in remission and she has no evidence of disease. Now, here's the thing. The scans can only catch when cancer is at a certain size. So there could be microscopic cancer floating around. The truth is that you and I probably have microscopic cancer floating around, but our immune system is able to pick it up. And someone who has cancer, obviously that cancer has grown to a point where it's able to evade the immune system. So E has about a 25% chance of relapse, which doesn't sound like a lot, but when it's your own child and you're thinking about the numbers, 25% suddenly feels really big. So we're going to try to do our best within our control to make sure she's on top of her nutrition. That's why I'm growing all of these things. We're also going to be doing our own type of integrative care through immune modulators. I'm not going to get into the weeds with that, but for her, she had a very aggressive type of cancer, and it is very likely that the microscopic cancer has, spread in her body. And the problem is that the chemotherapy didn't really work to the same extent that it would in an average child with rhabdomyosarcoma. So that's why we're kind of going down an integrative route to throw the kitchen sink at this. So at least for the time being, we've got 3 months of just peace before the next scan. So she will get monitored for the next 5 years. Every 3 months, she will get scans at this site, in addition to annual monitoring, brain MRI, whole body MRI, and some other stuff related to the genetic mutation that she has. But overall, we're obviously very elated. We're very relieved that we could be here. And so I've kicked the can down the road in terms of CSAs and needing to decide how to build my retail channel. So I'm here and I haven't yet made a decision. And a part of it is because while we were admitted last week for febrile neutropenia in the hospital, I might have done some retail therapy in the form of signing up for the Florette flower arranging workshop. Now, floral design has always been my weak point in all of flower farming. Even though I was new to growing, growing to me, if you understood the fundamentals, like you can make it work. Floral design feels a little bit different. I need like expertise help, and honestly, I just haven't ever dedicated enough time to it. So with me now not selling wholesale and really being able to take a breather, I wanted to take the course. And to me, that gives me an extra option of being able to offer a more premium offering, to perhaps do less transactions, but at a higher value. So I'm still trying to assess all of that. And the course is not going to start for another month, which is totally fine because we're not going to have flowers to design with for at least another month. But there might be some videos on you watching me progress through floral design, hopefully improving over time. And of course, I'll let you guys know how the workshop is. But I'm really excited because this is, for me, this is a way for me to upskill myself. Every single year I invest in a workshop to increase my knowledge related to flowers. Year 1 was a tulip workshop. Year 2 was the lily workshop. Year 3 was a rose course, which I plan on eventually putting in roses. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And year 4 is this floral arranging course. So let's actually talk about roses. One of the reasons why, well, 2 reasons why I haven't put in roses is because 1, don't really have the space. And the deer will eat the roses outside. I've tried it in landscaping. And 2, because of E's diagnosis last year, it kind of just put everything to a halt. But I think roses have a lot of potential. I think that they can plug a gap when I don't have flowers. Like roses would be blooming towards the end of this month before my lilies come in. It would be a great spring crop for me to capitalize on a time of year when people want flowers. And roses could also give you a second flush in the fall. I mean, they technically bloom throughout the entire season, but summer roses are typically very pest prone. They get rain damage on them and so forth. But anyway, so one of the things that we are really excited about is we are expanding this area. That's right. This entire fenced-in area, which Eric and I put up when we first started the flower farm, we're still going to keep it up, but we are putting on a 8-foot fence around our property. So from where the house is over there, basically all the way back. And this is about 2 acres. So it's a pretty big amount of space. I joke that some people spend their bonus on a vacation. We spend it on a fence. But the fence is really important to us because it obviously allows us to potentially expand growing more food for our family. It allows us to put things in the more perennial trees, things like asparagus that can't take a valuable real estate here, peonies, right? So for me, that's not just for a flower farm perspective, but it's also just like personal enjoyment. And we get to do that with more free reign without feeling like we're being constrained with real estate. So one of the reasons why it's taken so long to get there, we actually made this decision in January, is the fact that in where we live right now, you can't put up a 6-foot fence without a variance. And having gone through the variance with the pole barn back there, we didn't want to do that again. You can put up a 6-foot fence. But in recent years, neighbors have told us that they've lived here for decades. The deer will now scale over 6-foot fences because the population is exploding. Some years we get such dry weather that the deer are so desperate for food that they see stuff in your fence and they will get it. In fact, I caught a deer in here because I accidentally left open the gate. And when it saw me, it jumped over the fence to get out. So they're clearly capable of scaling this. So we're hoping an 8-foot fence is going to be more of a deterrent. And in order to qualify for that 8-foot fence, we went through the Right to Farm Act. We were able to qualify from the income that they needed, as well as just filling out all the paperwork. So I think in a few weeks, we're going to get a fence guy to come out here and do it. Told Eric we're not doing this ourselves, just don't have the energy and honestly the time and bandwidth to do it. So we're going to hire it out and splurge on that cost. But again, it's really important for us to now be able to grow an abundance of our own food. And I think for me, one of the things that I'm really laser focused now is I feel like when you have more space, you're actually less pressured to make the most out of it. I grew so much in this little townhouse space that I had through container gardening that I feel like my output was actually better when I was in that townhouse than when I was here. Now, granted, I didn't have to deal with weeds. I didn't have to deal with maintenance. I wasn't planting flowers, so there's a lot of other factors there. But I do feel like that I could be better with my output here. So it's not like we get the fence up, I'm going to be expanding immediately, but it does open my alternatives to a lot more perennials and therefore a lot less annuals needed to be grown in order to have enough flowers to sell. The goal is eventually to get to a point where I have a backbone of annuals for most of the growing season, to the point where I can be very selective about the annuals that I want to grow and grow the annuals that I want to experiment with, things that I haven't grown before, and do it more for fun than out of necessity. So that's it for now. This is a relatively bare farm. Get it? But I expect that in a month or so, things are going to change. So I can't wait to show you guys what this place looks like in a few weeks. And I think for a long time after this video, this will be one of the last times I get to say, here is an update on E.